We believe that videos, images, words, and sounds have the absolute power to inform, inspire, and entertain. We are united under the virtues of safety and knowledge. We are a training community of learners and teachers who encourage and energize each other to achieve greatness. We are pilots, videographers, photographers, freelancers, business owners, enthusiasts, experts, and apprentices. We are creators. We are the Drone U.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another awesome episode of Ask Drone U. My name is Paul.
And I'm Rob, and you're listening to episode number 317. Thank you very much for listening. We appreciate it as always.
And if you're listening from your car, your house, your headphones, your big Bluetooth headphones that are on your head, and
your Beats,
everyone is like, what is that guy doing? Thank you for listening. We
Absolutely.
Greatly appreciate it. I actually love wearing my big Beats headphones in the grocery store. Because when I lived in Europe, I did that because I couldn't understand a lot of what people were saying anyway.
Right.
So I would just wear big headphones. And in America, people like give you the stank eye.
Yeah, I think people see it as kind of almost rude.
And because people
they get offended by it.
Because people see it as rude and offended, I do it more often.
Of course you do, Paul. Is that a surprise to anybody that has been listening for a while?
I don't care what people think. So.
Well, not only do you not care, you like to poke the
the
bull, right?
Because then they leave me alone about it. Because I'm like, oh, you want me to stop this? Do you? Let's play this game. So anyway.
Goodness! All of that to say, thank you.
Yes, no, we really do appreciate it. Today's question is going to be a one that you guys will probably want to hear, all about what have we learned in the last year, and what.
Well,
tips?
even going back further than that, because you've been doing this for a while.
I have.
So.
I have.
A lot of lessons learned.
I just rememred another one.
Wow. Be ready for a 60-minute podcast.
Other schools versus...
I'm kidding.
Anyway.
40.
All right. Let's play the question. Let's just get right into this one. Today's question is brought to you by... Are you a drone pilot? Are you operating under a Section 333 exemption? Then you may be familiar with Item 27, which requires you to get a property release for every flight over property.
Legal Flyer is an app for iPhone and iPad that helps you create professional property releases in less time than it takes to do a pre-flight check.
You can add your pilot info, you can sign it, hand it to the property owner for their signature. But wait a second. Legal Flyer's advanced integration automatically adds latitude, longitude, and even altitude.
Then add a panorama straight from the app. Everything drops into a single-page PDF you can share with a single tap. It's compliance at light speed. Visit LegalFlyer.com for more information or get it straight from the App Store. Legal Flyer. Property releases for professional drone pilots.
Hey guys, this is Mike from Buffalo. I have a question that doesn't really pertain to any particular topic, more so for what you've learned over the past few years. So Paul, you've been doing this for a few years now. Is there anything that you've learned that you would have done differently in the past as far as technology, types of equipment you're using, business techniques, advertisement, marketing, anything in that field that you learn now that you wish you would have done differently? I think this question has a lot of insight for many of us who are just getting into this, and hopefully we can learn from some of your mistakes and what worked well for you. Once again, guys, I appreciate everything you do. I listen to your show every morning on the way to work. Would never miss a single episode. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike.
Seriously.
That means a ton, and we don't take that for granted for 1 second.
No, we don't. Actually, if Rob speaks nicely to you, you know you're special.
Wait a minute.
Anyway. Oh, it's been a long time. Rob, what have you learned?
Oh, man, what have I learned? I think he's asking about what you've learned.
Well, I want to know what you've learned, though. I mean, the SIMA has really been a challenge for you.
It has been. I've learned you've got to deep cycle your SIMA batteries. Or they change out your SIMA props.
What kind of flight time are you getting on those batteries?
At least 2.5 minutes. If I do what I'm supposed to do, Paul.
Oh, okay. Well, you're doing it right there, Rob. Every 10 cycles.
I've learned that you can't fly the SIMA in greater than 3.5 mile per hour winds. Is that what you had in mind, Mike?
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm guessing not.
So I know you wrote down some questions for me, and I wrote down a few things as well.
Yeah, I know you wrote down an essay. Let's just get into it.
I actually wrote down a whole page of stuff. There is no particular order to this. If you haven't figured out by now, I am the definition of ADD, and I don't take anything for it other than some B12. So
some coffee. Wait a minute.
yeah. Anyway, so there's no rhyme, reason, or organization to any of this. Things I have learned. Number 1, attitude mode is everything. And I really mean that because I've seen so many people try to film in GPS, even in the movies, and they just suck. And it's so easy for me to come around to those people.
So attitude mode is everything, but so is attitude.
That is true.
Right.
I actually did write that down at the very bottom. Always be nice to people.
Oh, that's right. No, but attitude is much broader than just being nice to people, which of course is important, I believe. But beyond that, it's having an attitude of just knowing that you're going to succeed. One of the things that I wrote down and
believe.
Yeah, believe in yourself. And one of the things that I've learned just in business in general is you got to go for it. And I'm saying that, guys, because that kind of goes against my nature personally, being a little vulnerable here. You've got to take risks.
If you don't take risks, how will you know if you ever would succeed?
Yeah, and so for example, and by the way, when I say that, I'm not talking about risks with safety. That is not talking about that kind of risk. It's talking about risks of your comfort zone and blowing out of that comfort zone.
Yes.
For example, one of the things that we've talked about a lot, Paul's talked about a lot, is networking. And let's be real, that's not comfortable probably for most people. Get over it and go do it, and that's the kind of risk that you're going to take if you've got the attitude that you need to succeed.
That is so true. Like as you just said that, I wrote down 3 more things that coincide with
there
that
you go.
entire
That's the way
bit.
Paul's mind works.
So, one of those things that you had mentioned is kind of that self-worth, that confidence.
Yeah.
Confidence is everything. It's one thing I've realized. If you don't believe in yourself when it comes to flying, you're going to crash. You're going to crash more often than people who do believe in themselves. And I say that because there are so many times where I've been training someone and more time, let me give you this example. Chris Gannon was here last week training, and he's actually gone through all of the material. I mean, all of the material.
It was fantastic because he was so prepared for the training.
Yes,
Made a
and
huge
he came
difference.
out, and his confidence was already at a point in which I can say, all right, let me mold this, and let me
It's good
work on this a
foundation.
little bit, and I'm going to make it grow. And by the end of the day, he was flying through 2-foot squares with his Phantom 3.
Right.
So that's pretty awesome. But it says something because in going through that information, he's gained his confidence a little bit because he has foundations of information that he knows for sure are correct.
Right.
But he also has a self-worth. He has the confidence, which is so important because let's give the example of this, right? I was just doing a shoot where I had to fly down this curvy road with a biker in between the trees.
Right.
And it was one of the most difficult things I'd ever done because of how fast the biker was going. And I've seen so many people in this same kind of instance, even at training, where they're about to hit something and they freak out, they geek out. And that's the thing that I've learned with some military adventures. It's some things that I've learned in some higher executive classes and whatnot, that everything is not about what you do, it's about how you do it.
Right.
And in this instance, with people who freak out when something happens, if you freak out and you're about to crash, guess what? You're going to crash.
Yeah.
But if you have that confidence, if you have that ability to wane the stress out of your mind, to not let it enter your mind, you would be flabbergasted by the things that you can accomplish,
Sure.
and by the amount of times that you almost have a crash and save it. So,
Absolutely. So
but also this is like if you're about to crash a car, right? There's 2 things you never do. You don't overreact, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is the same thing in a drone, and you've got to have the confidence to just stay the course and know, I'm about to hit something. Should I speed up or should I slow down?
Yeah, it's like a lot of NASCAR drivers. I think even in a couple of the NASCAR-related movies, right? Like when there's a crash, do you have the confidence to just hold your line? Because you're probably better off holding that line, and you're more likely to make it through the crash scene than if you try to swerve and miss. You're actually going to swerve into somebody, most likely.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if that's technically true from a NASCAR perspective, but at least in the movies it was.
Hey, I learned in the snow in Farmington that is definitely what would I have done different earlier is, number 1, assessed my self-worth and how much I can charge people. Number 2, increase my confidence. Number 3, I've never been one to think of the what ifs, but I would have been more confident, I guess you could say, but it's probably a good thing that I wasn't more confident. in all those instances, and I mean, like, I just hit the first key point here.
Sure.
Self-worth is just so important. If you don't believe that you're going to fly well, if you don't believe that you're going to start this business and it's going to be successful, I have news for you guys. It's not going to be successful. But one thing I will say that I've had to learn in my professional adult life is how important it is to listen. And I talk too much.
That's a good one.
I talk too much. I really do. And even when someone's about to say an important point and I interrupt because I think my point is just as important, it's not. And you can really learn so much from people just by listening.
That is very much what would I have done differently. And that's just, like you said, listen more, talk less. It's kind of like in negotiations. I mean, if you're negotiating and you're doing the talking, you're probably losing.
Yeah.
Right?
That's something I learned from Tim, by the way. I remember the first meeting I had with you and Tim, and this was before Drone You. This was when I was doing your social media. And Tim just sat there like, that may work.
Yeah. So
we'll let you know.
So be comfortable with awkward silence, right?
Yes.
Understand that it's more awkward to them than it is to you because you're comfortable with it.
Yeah, and honestly, if you're secure and you're like, all right, well, it's awkward in here, it's silent, whatever, and you don't let that get to you, that shows a lot about the type of character you have.
Sure.
And also the perseverance. But let's go to the next one. Then one thing I've learned, and I used to do this all the time, and I never do it anymore. I used to take off and land not near crowds, like not within 100 feet of crowds, but like within viewable distance, so that if the people in the crowd saw me, they'd like come over and talk about the drone and all that. Right now, I hate crowds. I cannot stand crowds.
Well, and if you're going to be in one, then you've got to section off an area that makes it very clear they cannot come into that area.
And even so, like, I don't even want to be in the viewing distance of the crowd, because whether someone's nice and comes up to you and asks you questions about flying, or whether someone's mean and asks you questions about flying, no matter what, it only causes problems.
Right.
You aren't paying attention to the drone 100%. And frankly, it's just, I hate crowds. I don't want people, and I know like this whole podcast is about asking questions, but I cannot stand it when people come up to me while I'm flying and ask me questions.
Well, there's an appropriate time for questions.
Yes.
Calling in to ask Drone You, appropriate.
Yes.
Walking up to somebody flying a drone, not appropriate.
Yes.
Clearly.
So now we have a bodyguard with a big rubber silicone hand, and they get slapped in the face when they ask questions. We don't actually have that, but that would be incredible.
That's going to be fun. I'll be that guy.
Anyway, lesson number 3, always be aware of the battery. And lesson number 4 goes with number 3, which is always battery test before you fly. What do I mean by that? If you're taking off your Phantom 3, you're taking off your Solo, you're taking off your Unique, you're taking off your Inspire 1, take off and then ram the power up to elevation. Like, as hard as you can go, ram the elevation up. Because if you have a voltage drop, you're going to have it happen right there, 10 feet in front of you, where you know it's safe to land, and you've got place where if you're going to have a problem, you can solve the problem right there. That way you avoid having problems when you're 5 minutes into a flight and all of a sudden you have a battery error or a voltage drop or something. So always be aware of the battery. I've told people from the beginning, you want to land, well, in the very beginning, it was the Phantom 1, Phantom 2 with a 3S battery, and I said, at 10.9 volts when you're flying, get home.
Yeah.
And now I tell people, when you're at 3.60 volts loaded, it's time to start thinking about coming home.
Sure.
And what I like about that is it doesn't matter what the temperature is. It doesn't matter what barometric pressure is. It doesn't matter what elevation you're flying. 3.6 volts is like your Merry Christmas phone number.
Yeah, because we often in different contexts talk about rules of thumb, and sometimes they actually help, sometimes they don't. That helps.
Yes.
In all circumstances, basically.
Another thing I've learned is never leave your batteries fully charged and stored. I used to tell people do that. Oh, it's fine. But they've changed the way that they use the battery... what is it called? The battery, the circuit boards, the balance circuit.
Okay.
They changed that. I've ruined 2 TB47s. I've ruined 5 Phantom 2 batteries, and I have yet to ruin a Phantom 3 battery. But I would say what I've learned in the last year about the Inspire is never buy the TB47 batteries. The TB48s can be stored longer. They can be contained and controlled better. They last longer. You can get more cycles on them.
And they're not that much more expensive,
No.
right? $20-$30.
I think it's 50, but yes.
50? Okay.
It's totally worth
Still.
it, because we've had 2 batteries go bad, and they're not even 6 months old.
Yeah, and the 48s, that's not happened to.
No.
As you talk about equipment, one of the things that I think we've learned is don't believe the hype. even if
No.
it's from us, right?
Seriously.
Until
At
you've
least,
tested
you know what
it.
though? At least we've come out and said we made a mistake.
Oh, sure.
And the Solo sucks, and don't buy it. So I mean, that's what comes to mind when I think of it.
Okay.
So, anyway.
Yes. And anyways,
Because we were that guy 2 years ago at NAB. This is a game changer.
Yes.
And now we don't use the word anymore. So anyway.
yeah. So we've learned to be a little bit more patient, let things play out.
Yeah.
Before we jump in and go crazy over
That's
something.
actually a really good point. One thing I've learned in social media with dronies is never be the first to post news. Only post news when you have something legitimate to say or a question or a point to make. Because there are so many people in the drone world now that start these Facebook pages up that are like, look at the news. And you're like, okay, so what did you add to that? What value proposition did you add to that? And this is something that John Rupert was talking to me about actually two weeks ago. And he's so right. I would rather be the best than the first. So
Oh,
that's
of
something
course.
that I've learned in the last year, maybe the last month.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
So just relax.
Yeah.
Understand that if you don't, I guess, if you're not the first, you're probably going to actually be better off.
Yes,
the
that's
bottom
something
line.
I've learned too. And when we're talking about being the first, you never want to be the first to buy a drone from any new drone. So P4, just like the P3, a lot of people were having problems the first week or so, but then they figured it out. You don't want to be the guy that has to go through all that hoo-la-la.
Yeah,
to
the
get
cool
a
thing
new
with something
drone.
like that is it's generally software related, right? So it's an update or two that they're probably going to have to
Yeah,
fix.
but that can cause significant problems. For example,
Oh, sure.
the new firmware for the Inspire 1, the 1.8, if you guys use the X3 camera, do not upgrade your firmware.
Another thing that you've learned, because I think it used to be just the update comes out and you load it, right?
Yeah.
But
I
a
haven't
couple of-
updated since 1.4. I'm like, no, I don't want your stupid geofencing. I don't want your stupid features. Like, this flies fine. I know how to use it really well, and you guys can't screw it up for me.
So there you go. Don't update for the sake of updating. Understand what that update does.
Yeah.
And make sure it's something you need, first of all, which
Yeah.
you just alluded to. And second of all, are there issues associated with that update that you need to be aware of?
Well, something else to think about, all these updates, if we look at the progression of updates from 2010 to 2016 right now, what's happened? The amount or the areas in which we can fly have been slowly getting smaller and smaller and smaller because DJI was making friends with the FAA, which is fine. Now we're seeing a divergence from that, which is good. But it's also why I don't update my firmware. So, and then
Cool.
people are like, well, why didn't you update your firmware? Because in cold weather, your batteries can just drop all of a sudden. It's like, well, if you know how to take care of your batteries, you won't have that problem.
This takes us back to rule of thumb, batteries.
Yep.
et
All
cetera.
right. So anyway, next thing. Another lesson I've learned. Never leave your props on your drone more than 10 hours, meaning you never fly more than 10 hours on your props. Why? Because they begin to track. Tracking is when the blades begin to bend up and you get less and less and less flight time. And then all of a sudden, like the end or the tip will crack off. And when the prop becomes unbalanced, you're actually going to lose the prop and then you're going to lose the drone. It's happened to me. Trust me, you don't want this to happen. 10 hours is the best way.
So how much is a set of props for, say, the Inspire 1?
I think they're like $12, $13 for a pair, so $26 for the whole drone.
So think about that. I mean, that's really a simple
Yeah.
thing. $30 to save your $4,000 drone. I mean, duh, really.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people don't take it seriously. So, all right, here's my big kicker. Dronies that have the 333 are the same type of personality as Mean Girls in high school. And
They can be.
They can
We
be.
don't like to use too broad of a brush here at Drone U.
That's right. I was actually told before this to never say never or always. So
That's right.
there are instances
Thank you.
where 333 operators are mean girls. What am I talking about? We've actually done a poll here, or I've done a poll of all of the, I call them our like top 100. So the first members that were with Drone U.
Yeah. Which, gosh, we
and-
appreciate to this day
Yes.
so much.
And how many people have had the FAA called on them, and then how many of those calls have been because of another operator?
Yeah.
97.3% are
Wow,
because of
that's
another
a pretty precise
operator.
percentage.
I may have just made that up. It's like 95%.
But the reality is the vast majority.
Yes. I mean, there's only been one instance of all of everything that I tested, which was like, I think I got 20 or 30 phone calls, or examples of phone calls, and only one was not from another operator.
Yeah.
So what have I learned? Don't friend them. Don't try to make friends with them, because people do this. They say, oh, well, I actually really like Chris Gannon's philosophy about this. Don't friend them. Don't try to be nice to them. They will stab you in the back. This is the gold rush. This is the drone world. And people who suck at flying drones but have a 333 will do anything to get you off of their competition list because they're threatened by you.
Yeah.
So by you making friends with them is not going to help. And I love what Chris Gannon said, where he's like, I'm just not going to post about my jobs anymore. I'm just not going to, do certain things. I'm going to be very vague. Like, I may take a picture of my drone on takeoff, but not post the video.
Yeah.
It's like, be smart. And honestly, I like Nick Gannon's I keep saying Nick. I like Chris Gannon's philosophy of just block them on Facebook. Don't deal with them. Don't talk to them in groups.
Yeah.
It's only going to cause you stress. It's only going to cause you issues. So just guys, understand that there may be other people that fly drones, and if they fly drones commercially, you need to be very careful what you say in front of them, because we all have our own ideology of what's right and wrong with the FAA, and that's very clear. So I would just say, don't talk about your other jobs, just talk about your love of flight. So.
And at the same time, understand, I think, at least in the context of that conversation, of that discussion, is it's relatively temporary. I mean, the changes are coming such that this environment that we're in that even allows for that kind of thing should be changing and going away. As hopefully, and it will eventually. It might not be as soon as we would all like, but understand that you're operating within a certain set of circumstances, and just be patient and know that those will change.
Yeah.
Or maybe you change your own circumstances. You go get your 333 and now you're on par and so forth.
But here's the thing. If you want to one-up these words I can't use right now. If you want to one-up these people, and when you get your license or whatever you're going to do for commercial jobs, whether it's 107, 333, or just neither, here's how you can one-up them. Be a better pilot. Videography is the most difficult. There's a reason why all the new people go right into photography, and video is like the second thing to come, because it's so difficult. If you want to be better than all of these people, fly every day, because they're not. And
Right.
if you do, by the time that all of this goes away, like you say, these operators who have been calling the FAA on other operators, those people are going to go away because they're not going to have any business.
Right. So what you've learned then in that sense is focus on what's important. Don't get caught up in that. And understand that will take care of itself if you do what you need to do. The only time I would say it's appropriate to perhaps report something is if you see somebody doing something completely unsafe.
Yeah.
And even then, I'd probably talk to them first.
Yeah.
Instead of going behind their back and reporting them. Be an adult. It's not difficult.
I think it is difficult because
No,
a lot
it's
of people
not.
were babied and a lot of
communicate.
people were spoiled when they grew up, and, oh, honey, it's going to be okay. I know you messed up, but that's okay. Me, I'm going to be like, I'm going to kick your ass, kid. So anyway, I grew up where it's okay for that to happen.
So let me ask you, moving on a little bit, this is one I want to make sure we get to, is what have you learned? What would you have done differently in terms of dealing with clients? Thought about that?
Always be clear on payment terms. Never, and see, this is like, I really give it to Vic that he's got the level of trust that he does. And I think it makes sense because I heard a Freakonomics podcast about doctors who get sued for malpractice and doctors that don't. And they finally correlated it down to how you treat your patients in the lobby is the likelihood of how.
That is fascinating.
Yes.
I love that.
So it makes sense why Vic's whole trust game, and I don't do contracts because I do trust. He's projecting that trust before he gets the trust, which is why he never uses contracts. I don't think that works for like 95% of people. It works for Vic because he's a very trusting, honest, forthright person.
Yeah.
And he's the type of people I love to work with. And everyone at Drone U is pretty much like that. But for a vast majority of people, it's not going to work. There are people who are going to take advantage of you. So 2 things. Always have contracts, number 1. Number 2, always have property releases, because that could actually be the one thing that saves your butt in court. Because if you have permission to fly on someone's property, that's really the key of what we've been learning in recent case law.
And the reason to have contracts is so that everything is understood up front.
Yes.
No surprises.
Yes. Always get 50% up front on your jobs before you go, or else I don't show up. And I've told people that too. I'm like, all right, I know you haven't paid me your deposit yet on your contract, but I want to be very clear that I'm not even going to go unless you pay me the 50% up front. And I know in your calendar it's booked, but in my calendar, you're not booked until you pay. And you've got to have that backbone. I mean, it is so important for you guys to have that backbone.
And it's hard. We get it.
Yeah, but that's where the whole thing is, where I talked at the beginning, self-worth, the confidence. Like, if you don't have the confidence, if you don't have that security, just stop now. Why? Because if you don't believe that you can change that in yourself, you're going to fail. Might as well just, like, instead of kicking the can down the road, just throw the can out, because you have got to have that self-worth. You have got to have that confidence. You've got to believe in yourself, and you've got to be willing to learn, and you've got to be willing to be tenacious.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, the only thing that's going to make you different from everyone else is your ability to change and adapt, and your ability to continue working beyond what other people will do.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Anyway, I'm getting really passionate about this.
That's
one.
awesome. No,
So,
it's good. Learned a lot.
One thing I realized in the last year, takeoff pads are key. We live in the desert. There's lots of sand here. And I just use, I don't know what they're called, but it's like a plastic cardboard, and it's just a black sheet. Mine's only 36 by 24. That's probably not going to be big enough for most of you. Like a 48 by 48 is probably good. I'm talking about inches.
Right.
And this is a takeoff pad, so when I'm taking off, I'm not blowing dust on my camera.
Yep.
Because I've had instances before where I've taken off and I've gotten dust on the lens, and then I come back down, I got the sweet shot, and there's this massive dot on the lens.
Yeah.
So takeoff pads are really key. And the other thing too is always, always, always check which polarizing or neutral density filter you have on. Hey, it's sunny. All right, ND32. Hey, it's overcast. Maybe ND4, ND8. Hey, it's really overcast. Okay, no neutral density filter. Maybe we'll just do polarizing. I'm not a fan of the polarizing filters that I've seen so far for the Inspire 1, because you get blue sky right in the middle and not around. I actually made that mistake on a recent gig. So checking your filters before you fly is super, super key. Another thing, this is a question I've gotten. I've trained 5 or 6 people in the last 2 weeks, one-on-one, and this is a question I get every single time. Paul, do you fly FPV or do you fly line of sight, like spatial awareness?
Right.
There's no one answer. I'm always doing
Depends
both.
on the circumstances.
Yeah.
Sure.
So-
And the environment.
But one thing I will say is that you have to learn to go full FPV in order to film well, because you've always got to be focusing on your framing.
Right.
So
That makes sense.
know your surroundings. Really big deal. I mean that too. Look up. Are there birds? Are there power lines? Are there people? There homes? Really know your surroundings. My last one of this list, always be nice to people. We already talked about that. Humble sells, and it really does.
That's a great segue into something that I was wanting to make sure we discuss, and that is, what have you learned about marketing? Like, how did you start out marketing? How do you do it now? What's different about those?
So that's actually a great question. When I worked for Aflac, I don't know if you know this, but I was actually one of the top salesmen in Aflac.
Oh yeah, we know that, Paul.
So, one thing I learned in Aflac though is that sales are cyclical, meaning you start calling people, you've got a lot of people in your hopper, you start doing the work, and you've been
servicing those
servicing
guys,
the work,
yep.
and now your hopper
You're
is
not
starting
selling
to go,
anymore.
Exactly, it's going
Yep.
down. So then you're calling again, and you're getting business, and then you're doing the business, and then you're servicing the business, and you've lost all your leads. So it's like this, hilly nature.
So true.
And what you've got to do, I actually learned this from John Rupert, is I use Streak in my Gmail browser now. So I have what is it called? Google Corporate. So it's like Gmail, but it's the corporate version. And I use Streak to track all of my leads and know, are they a lead? Have I closed them? When was the last I talked to them? What needs to be done next? So this is my way to really manage them.
Mm-hmm.
It's customer relationship management.
Right.
Inside of your email. Speaking of customer relationship, the biggest thing I've learned in the last year by far with hands down, without a doubt, is that relationships are everything.
Absolutely. So that sort of answers the what kind of marketing did you start using versus what you use now?
Well, Instagram is a big marketing. Word of mouth is going to be huge. Working with people. I would say there's a lot of, I just need to do a marketing class because there's like 11 different things that any one person can do. There have been 3 specific things that have really helped me get business. And I don't want to give those out to the podcast community. I want to keep that for the members because I don't want it, if everyone knows it, then it's not going to help the people who really use that. I can think of 3 specific things, and it does not have to do with Facebook. It does not have to do with Instagram, and it does not have to do with really social media as a whole.
Cool.
And it works better. So
cool.
At least I found. But
awesome. So I guess the grand picture to that is relationships. It always comes down to relationships.
You always have to be networking. That's one thing. If you're not networking twice a month, you're not going to get business. Always network with people, focus on relationships. And a lot of people don't know how to network. So here's an example of how I would network following like the rules of networking. Hey, Rob, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, but I just wonder, how's the family doing? How's work doing?
Busy.
Yeah.
Family's good, though. I'm very, very pleased with, how things are going. It's just really busy.
Yeah. What's keeping you busy?
A lot of kids.
Really?
A lot of
well,
sports.
you know what? You've got a beautiful family, Rob.
Oh,
So
thank
you've got a lot to be proud of.
Thank you.
But so is the business doing well? I mean, just family busy? Like, help me out here.
Well, family's very busy, as I said, but yeah, business is doing good. It can always be a little bit better. But,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well,
but we're doing all right.
It's kind of a cyclical nature. So,
doing all right.
So what kind of business are you in, Rob?
Well, sales.
Oh, what do you sell?
The opportunity for people to buy a house.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So are you doing a lot of social media and stuff?
We do a little bit of social media. We don't do as much as we probably should, but we've tried it. We haven't done a very good job with it, and so then we'll do it a little bit for a little while, and we don't have a lot of success, so we stop.
So what are you finding that's working for marketing for you?
Word of mouth.
Really?
Past clients. We've been doing it long enough to where we have a nice backlog, if you will, of clients and relationships that kind of keep feeding things. So
Gotcha.
We're fortunate in that sense.
So what would you say is like your biggest hopper feeder? What's
biggest hopper feeder would probably be past clients.
You think so?
Yeah.
Because I heard you do those realtor tours, and those are really useful for you.
Those can be good. But they take a little bit of time. You got to put in the energy and the effort for quite a while to have that payoff. I guess that's true with probably anything, right?
But you're using a lot of realtors, right? Like you're going through realtors to get this new business?
Yeah. That's obviously a big part of anybody who does mortgages is realtor business.
Totally.
Sure.
Well, what if I could give you something that could maybe amplify your presence to realtors, wouldn't cost you anything, and would actually help me get in the door with your realtors to try and do some work?
I love the wouldn't cost anything part of that.
Well, how about this? I'll do a drone video. So what I do is I fly cameras. I really market for people. I help, showcase the key factors in videos or the key factors in whatever you're selling and help people visualize that. Because if people can really visualize the transformation from one point to another, they tend to seek more value in those things, and they tend to have a more respect for those things. But what if I I'll do a free drone video of one of your realtor's properties for free.
Okay.
You guys give it away.
Cool.
It'll help amplify your ability to get realtors, and it'll bring me into the door.
Sure. No, I'd be happy to try that.
Cool. So cutting that off, a couple things here. Number one, who was doing the most talking?
Me, because you were asking questions.
Exactly. But after I asked you a question, what was the next thing that I did?
You acknowledged
Edification.
Yeah.
I said, you've got a beautiful family. You got a lot to be happy for. And you're like, oh, wow, thank you, Paul.
Yeah, I feel good.
Edification is step number 1. Step number 2, let them talk.
Yeah.
Always find out what is feeding their mind. They've either got a health issue, a business issue, or an at-home issue. Never talk about at home. Always try to focus on business or any other like health-related things,
Sure.
Something I learned from a sales guy who actually taught me a lot. There's 5 steps here. We just kind of went through the first 3, but you've got to figure out a way, how can you provide this person with value and make it seem that he's the only one getting the value?
Yeah, and that person is important, that you truly want to help them.
Yeah. So it's funny, Chris Gannon, going back to him, he was like, "You're like a natural born salesman." I'm like, "No, I'm not. You just have to listen to people. You have to figure out what makes them tick, what makes them interested,
Yeah.
and then roll with that."
Yeah, and be sincere. I mean,
too.
just be caring and sincere, and
Yeah.
hopefully y'all don't have to work too hard at that, right?
Yeah,
But
seriously.
even if you do it.
So speaking of business, one thing I've
Wow.
learned in the last 2 years, business is cyclical, meaning most of your business is in the summer. So you've got to save a lot of money in the summer in order to survive the winter,
Yeah.
or you need to be setting up clients in the fall for the winter, like resorts, like snowboarding, like vacation destinations in the Caribbean. So that's another big one. Another issue I've learned, SD cards suck. And you want to make sure that you always have the right kind.
Yeah.
The gold cards by SanDisk, they're class 10. I always look at the right speed of cards, whether they're class 10, class 8, 9, 1, whatever. Just look at the right speed. If you don't know the right speed of the card, you don't know what you're getting. So don't.
Are SD cards something that you should just change out as a normal course of business?
Yes.
Or okay, as opposed to waiting until they go bad?
Yeah.
I don't know what time frame that
Well,
is.
for example, I normally get some every quarter. I'm getting some tomorrow or today for tomorrow.
Okay.
And last year Q4 we bought 2 or 3 SD cards. So
Yeah, so we really don't go through that many. And
No.
they're not that expensive anymore,
No.
obviously.
Foreign contracts. One thing I've learned is that if you're going over the border to do a foreign contract, you're there to see friends.
Okay. Cool.
No, I say that because I give the example when I was going over to Canada and I went through Border Patrol, I got pulled in and they were like, "Don't fly your drone near fires. Are you here to make money?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm here to make money." And they're like, "Let me see your Canadian license." And I'm like, "Well, I don't need a Canadian license because I qualify under this, and this." And I had to show them each of those paperworks, which was like registration for the drone, insurance, and that I had, I forget what the third thing
So
was.
maybe what you've learned there is be sure and do your homework, right?
Yeah.
Don't get caught
Yeah.
not having done the work to do what you need to do.
Yeah, but I say that because also he was like, "Oh, you're making money here in Canada." And I was like, "Yeah, but it's from an American company." So they looked at my contract, almost taxed me. Ended up they didn't tax me because it was for an outside corporation.
Wow.
Which was a huge blessing, or else I would have been taxed out the wazoo.
Before you ever flew and made a dime, huh?
Exactly.
Really?
Yes. So yeah. So this is
Wow.
why I tell people if you're crossing the border, you're going to go see friends. So I couldn't be. And I found out too later that the surfers, because they win money in one country and come back, and there's this certain thing that they have to do. And it's always visiting friends.
Right.
And I mean, even if I would have said visiting friends with my drone, it would have made no difference on how they
Sure.
would have looked at that. So I just say,
Cool.
I'm visiting friends. One other thing I will say is that in the winter, going back to business is cyclical. Look for work in other countries, especially warmer countries. I give the Mexico.
Yeah.
I'm leaving next Friday for Mexico for 4 days to do a job. So, and there's no 333 needed down there for that. Anyway, one of the things I learned very first, and I have to say this just because this is the reason we started Drone U, is that there are a lot of drone schools right now. You've got schools that are run out of hobby stores, which you're going to get that pretty much new pilot experience amount of information.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got schools that pretty much teach, they're like the UAV experts or whatever experts. And there's a couple other schools, and they teach you mostly military information. They teach you
Right.
about the history of drones, fixed-wing drones, camera platforms and sensors, but it's mostly military. You don't really learn the intricacies of multi-rotors.
Sure.
That's why we made Drone U, because I actually had gone to one of those schools and they didn't even own a drone. They had other people who
Paul.
were their instructors who had
Details.
drones. So anyway, that's why we have Drone U and our flying field and the online courses and everything. Last thing, redundancy is your best friend.
Mm-hmm.
You always want to have a backup drone with you. And I didn't used to do that.
Learn that the hard way, I'm sure.
Yep, I think you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
Always have backup batteries, backup remotes, backup filters, and backup props.
Yeah.
You want multiple forms of redundancy on just about anything.
For
So,
obvious reasons.
Yes.
Cool.
Gosh, I feel tired of talking now.
That's fun, though. It's fun talking about that and what we've learned and we still are going to be learning a lot more, as are you.
The most difficult
cool.
thing for me is the cyclical nature through the year of business.
Yeah.
For example, this year, January was dead. February had some stuff. March I had a couple things. April my phone's blowing up. May phone blows up.
Right.
June I turned my phone off. So, I mean, and then in December I'm wondering why people aren't calling me. So, but I will say this: my first year cyclically it was April to October.
Yeah.
My second year it was March to December, and then my third year, which was last year, was really February to December.
Well, yeah, because you start to develop those relationships, which is, again, why it's so important. And you start to learn about new opportunities, and more people know what you do, and they like what you do. And those grow to where they expand across most, if not all, of the year.
Yes. And, John, if you'll write down this timestamp for the bleep indicator. Oh, no. The one thing I've learned, too, is you have got to know when to charge full fee. So, and I mean that because if someone is mean to you, and I want him to, they need to bleep that out. That's the only one I'm going to do. But if you're working with someone who is difficult, charge them more, and don't be afraid of it, because in the end, they're going to cost you so much time and stress. You're going to need to charge them more. And you also need to know when to walk away.
That's understanding the quadrant. And we'll just give you a couple of them. High profit, low maintenance.
Yes.
That's what you want.
Yes.
And then you've got low profit, high maintenance. Yeah. You don't ever want to go there. You can go to the high profit, high maintenance, but that's when you're going to charge a little bit more.
Yep. Anyone who's high maintenance, I feel like it's like that episode or the movie Taken, where he's arguing with the drug dealers and they're like, "What do you want, American?" And he's like, "Well, I'm here to negotiate the rate," and it just went up 10%. So, and I mean, like, that's how, like, if I deal with someone who's totally full of themselves, egotistical, I don't tell them that they're gonna get the AHO upcharge, but they're getting the AHO upcharge. Yeah. So, and then the other thing is, I would say that I've learned in the last year, if you ever have anyone who's late to pay you, don't work with them again, because that's just going to get worse and worse over time. They obviously don't have the respect for you to pay you on time, so drop them like a rock. And I just had a client like that recently who was 30 days late, and then, he asked me for a bunch of help after he paid, and I just said, "No, I'm sorry, like, you're late. I haven't, I'm not going to help you." And he's like, "Well, don't you want my future business?" And I said, "No, I don't want your future business." And he was like, "Why not?" And I said, "Well, you were late to pay. You were very difficult to work with. Our terms are very clear, and you didn't respect the terms of the agreement. Thus, I do not wish to invite you into future agreements." And he's like, "Well, I'm one of the newest, highest producing brokers." And I was like, "Not for long." So anyway, I'm not afraid to tell people off if I really don't like them. But anytime I meet someone, I give them multiple opportunities where I'm nice throughout. Like, I'm always I'll meet any person and be extremely nice and humble and honest. But until you give me a reason to not treat you like that, I'll continue to be nice to you. But as soon as you give me that reason, get ready. Cool. Because the tides are a-turning.
Oh, yes, indeed. I have no doubt. All right. So, Mike, thank you very much for the question. We really, really appreciate it. That was fun. And it was a good, thoughtful question that hopefully led to some useful information for all of you guys out there. Yes. And guys, if you have a question, don't forget to go to askdroneu.com. Don't forget about the contest that's ongoing, and so get your name in for that. Johnny, the last couple podcasts, he's got a couple entries right there. So his odds of winning just went up by doing that. So get your questions in so you can be a part of that as well.
Definitely, guys. That's going to do it for us. If you have a question, again, Ask Drone You. Check us out on Instagram, Twitter. We want to hear what you want to see at NAB, so let us know. We will be taking note of that. We will be at NAB next week, so yeah, we'll be actually recording from a whole new location.
Could be fun.
Look forward to seeing you guys there. Again, guys, thank you so much for listening. We really do appreciate it, and we will see you next time. My name is Paul.
I'm Rob.
And this is Ask Drone You.
We believe that videos, images, words, and sounds have the absolute power to inform, inspire, and entertain. We are united under the virtues of safety and knowledge. We are a training community of learners and teachers who encourage and energize each other to achieve greatness. We are pilots, videographers, photographers, freelancers, business owners, enthusiasts, experts, and apprentices. We are creators. We are the Drone Youth.